I was browsing through the dusty shelves of the secondhand bookshop, looking for nothing in particular, just a way to kill time. The door creaked open behind me, and I heard a soft, almost melodic voice ask, "Do you know where I can find anything by James Baldwin?" I turned around, my heart skipping a beat when I saw him, tall, with messy hair, and a smile that made you feel like you were in on a secret.
"Yeah, he's over here," I managed to say, leading him to the small but, stocked section on queer literature.
As I handed him Giovanni's room, our fingers brushed, and I felt a jolt like static electricity. "Thanks," he said, glancing at me with those deep, brown eyes. "I'm Braden, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Braden," I replied, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. "I'm Lucas." He chuckled, picking up on my awkwardness, but not in a mean way. "Lucas. Cool name. You a Baldwin fan, too?" "Yeah, he's Baldwin," I shrugged, a bit embarrassed by my lack of eloquence. We talked about Baldwin for a while, the conversation flowing naturally. I hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in a long time. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Want to grab a coffee? There's a place around the corner." I was taken aback, but in a good way. Sure, why not? As we walked out of the bookshop, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted in my life, like I was standing on the edge of something new and exciting, but also terrifying. We reached the coffee shop, a quaint little place that smelled of freshly ground beans and cinnamon. As we settled into a corner booth, Braden leaned in, his expression suddenly serious. "So, Lucas, tell me, what do you think about intimacy?" The question caught me off guard. Intimacy? Like, in relationships? "Yeah," he nodded, his gaze unwavering. "When does it start for you?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of the question. "I used to think it started with a kiss, but I don't know anymore. What about you?" Braden smiled, but there was a hint of something else in his eyes. Something darker, more complex. "I think it starts when you least expect it. Like now, maybe." Before I could respond, the waitress came over to take our orders, breaking the tension. But as we talked and laughed over our coffees, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said or the way his presence made me feel, a strange mix of comfort and excitement, like I was on the brink of something that could either be amazing or disastrous. As we left the cafe, Braden turned to me and said, "This was fun, Lucas. Let's do it again sometime." Yeah, I agreed, trying to play it cool. But as I walked home, my mind was racing. Who was this guy really, and why did I feel like my life was about to change just because I met him? Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The next few days were a blur of anticipation. Braden and I exchanged texts, each message, a mix of casual banter and something else simmering beneath the surface. He was funny, smart, and there was a confidence in his words that made me eager to see him again. We finally agreed to meet at a park near my apartment, a quiet spot where the trees provided some much-needed shade from the summer heat. I was already there, sitting on a bench, when I saw him walking toward me. He had that same easy smile, his hair still a mess, and he was holding 2 ice creams, one vanilla and one chocolate. "I didn't know which you liked, so I got both," he said, handing me the chocolate one. "Thanks," I replied, grinning as I took it.
"Chocolate's my favorite."
"Lucky guess," he said, sitting down next to me, close enough that our legs brushed against each other. We talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as naturally as it had in the bookshop. But there was something different this time, a tension between us that hadn't been there before. The way he looked at me, his eyes lingering just a bit too long, made my heart race. At some point, we ended up walking through the park, our ice creams long gone, and I found myself wanting to know more about him, more than just the surface stuff. "So, Braden," I started trying to sound casual. "What's your deal? What do you do when you're not hanging out with random guys you meet in bookshops?" He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made me smile. "I'm a freelance graphic designer, which is a fancy way of saying I work from home in my pajamas most days." "What about you?" "I work in marketing," I said, a bit sheepishly. "It's not as cool as designing stuff, but it pays the bills." He shrugged. Hey, as long as you like it, right? Yeah, I agreed, though I wasn't sure how true that was. We kept walking, the conversation drifting to other things, but that tension remained. It was like we were both waiting for something to happen, but neither of us wanted to make the first move. As we reached the edge of the park, near a small, secluded grove of trees, Braden suddenly stopped and turned to me. You know, Lucas, he said, his voice quieter now, more serious. I've been thinking about what you said at the cafe. About intimacy. My heart skipped a beat. Yeah. He stepped closer, and I could feel the heat radiating off him. I think you're right. It doesn't always start with a kiss, but sometimes it does. And before I could say anything, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't like the first kiss I'd had years ago, the one that had left me feeling nothing. This was different. Braden's lips were soft, but there was a hunger behind them, a need that matched my own. I kissed him back, my hands instinctively reaching up to hold him, to pull him closer. The world around us seemed to disappear. All I could feel was him. All I could think about was how right this felt, how everything in my life had led up to this moment. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, our foreheads resting against each other. That was something, I whispered, my voice shaky. Yeah, Braden agreed, his breath warm against my skin. It was. We stood there for a few more seconds, just holding each other, before he finally stepped back, a small smile playing on his lips.
So, Lucas, what now?
I chuckled, still trying to catch my breath. I guess we keep seeing where this goes. Sounds good to me, he said, his smile widening. How about dinner tomorrow? My place. Yeah, I'd like that. As we walked out of the park side by side, I couldn't help but feel that the kiss had changed everything. There was no going back now. Whatever this was between us, it was real, and it was only going to get more intense from here. The next evening, I stood outside Braden's apartment building, a nondescript brick facade in a quieter part of town. My nerves were on edge as I pressed the buzzer for his unit, my heart racing with both excitement and a hint of anxiety. Last night's kiss had changed things between us, and now, as I waited for him to answer, I couldn't help but wonder what tonight would bring. The door clicked open, and I made my way up the narrow stairs to the third floor. Braden greeted me at the door, his usual smile in place, but there was something different in his eyes, an intensity that made my breath catch. Hey, come on in, he said, stepping aside to let me in. His apartment was small but cozy, filled with the kind of character that only comes from someone who's lived a life. Art prints and sketches adorn the walls, a collection of vinyl records lined the shelves, and the smell of something delicious cooking wafted from the kitchen. Wow, this place is you, I said, taking it all in. Braden chuckled. Yeah, I guess it is. Make yourself comfortable. Dinner's almost ready. I took a seat on the couch, trying to relax, but my mind was buzzing with questions. Who was this guy, really? We had chemistry, no doubt about that, but there was so much I didn't know about him. And something told me tonight was the night I'd start finding out. Braden emerged from the kitchen with 2 plates of pasta, the kind that looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. Hope you like Italian, he said, handing me a plate. I love it, I replied, genuinely impressed. Did you make this yourself? Yep, family recipe, he said, sitting down next to me. I don't just design things, you know? As we ate, the conversation flowed easily, just like it had before. But there was still that undercurrent of something deeper, something unsaid. Finally, as we were finishing up, Braden set his fork down and looked at me, his expression serious. Lucas, there's something I need to tell you, he began, his tone hesitant. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Okay? What is it? He took a deep breath, his gaze not quite meeting mine. I've been in relationships before, with guys, but there's something different about this, about you. I waited, sensing that there was more to this confession.
Different how?
I'm still figuring things out, he admitted, finally looking at me. I've been with women too, but nothing ever felt, right? And with you, it does. But I don't want to hurt you if I'm still searching, you know. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been so caught up in the excitement of our connection that I hadn't considered the complexities behind it. But now, sitting here with him, I realized that this wasn't just a fling. There were real feelings involved, real risks. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. Braden, I appreciate you telling me. Honestly, I'm still figuring things out too. But I want to see where this goes, with you. A wave of relief washed over his face, and he reached out to take my hand. Me too. I'm just scared, I guess. Me too, I admitted, squeezing his hand. But maybe we can figure it out together? He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that made my heart swell. I'd like that. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of his confession hanging in the air. But instead of pulling us apart, it seemed to bring us closer, like we were both stepping into the unknown hand in hand. Then, just as the tension was beginning to ease, there was a sudden knock on the door, loud, urgent. Braden's eyes widened, and he jumped up, his expression shifting to one of surprise, maybe even fear. "Who could that be?" I asked, confused by his reaction. I don't know, he muttered, moving toward the door with caution. As he opened it, a tall figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim hallway light. The tension in the room skyrocketed, and I could feel my pulse quicken. "Braden," the stranger said, his voice deep and familiar. "We need to talk." I didn't know who this guy was, but the look on Braden's face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a casual visitor. This was someone from Braden's past, someone who could potentially change everything. And just like that, the night took a turn I hadn't seen coming. The room felt smaller, the air thick with tension as Braden stood frozen by the door. The stranger didn't move, just stared at Braden with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I could see Braden's jaw tighten, his fists clenching at his sides as if he was holding back a flood of emotions. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but my unease was clear. Braden didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped aside, allowing the man to walk into the apartment. The guy was tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that filled the room. He looked at me briefly, then turned his attention back to Braden, his expression unreadable. "Lucas, this is Ryan," Braden finally said, his voice strained. "Ryan, this is Lucas." Ryan didn't bother with pleasantries. He just nodded in my direction before focusing back on Braden. "We need to talk. Now." The command in his voice made it clear this wasn't a request. Braden's eyes flicked to me, an apology written in them, but he didn't say anything. "Look, if this is something private, I can leave," I started, but Braden shook his head. "No. Stay," he said firmly. But there was a vulnerability in his tone I hadn't heard before. "Ryan, whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of Lucas." Ryan sighed, clearly frustrated, but he nodded. "Fine. You want the truth out in the open. Here it is." He took a step closer to Braden, the tension between them palpable. "You've been dodging my calls for weeks, Braden. You can't keep running away from this." Braden's face hardened. "I'm not running. I'm done, Ryan. We're done." The words hung in the air, heavy and final, but they didn't seem to have the effect Braden hoped for. Ryan's expression didn't change. If anything, his eyes darkened. "You think it's that easy? You think you can just walk away from everything we had?" Ryan's voice was low, almost dangerous. "You owe me more than that." "Maybe I do," Braden admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's over, Ryan. I've moved on." Ryan's gaze shifted to me, and for the first time I saw something like recognition. Or was it disdain with him? He asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Braden stepped closer to me, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "Yes, with Lucas. I'm trying to build something real here, something that doesn't involve all the lies." Ryan scoffed, shaking his head. "You think you can start fresh with him? Just like that? What happens when he finds out the truth, Braden? About us? About what you did?" "What truth?" I asked, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. I was done being a silent observer. Braden looked at me, pain in his eyes, but before he could speak, Ryan answered for him. Did he tell you about us, Lucas? About how we were together for years. About how he just up and left, no explanation. About the business deal that went south because he couldn't handle the pressure. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to Braden, searching his face for any sign that this wasn't true, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Braden, is this true? I asked, my voice trembling. He finally looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. Yes, it's true. Ryan and I were together for 3 years. It was complicated. I left because I couldn't deal with the mess we'd made, the lies we told each other, the way our business partnership started to poison everything. Ryan cut in, his voice bitter. And now you're doing the same thing to him, running away when things get tough, pretending you can just start over like nothing happened. Stop it, Ryan, Braden snapped, anger flashing in his eyes. This is different. Lucas is different. I'm trying to be honest this time. The room fell silent, the weight of the confession settling over us. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I'd been dragged into something much bigger than I understood, and the ground beneath me felt unsteady. Finally, I broke the silence. Braden, I need to know. Are you still running? Braden's eyes met mine, and I could see the struggle within him. But then he shook his head, stepping toward me. No, Lucas. I'm not running anymore. I want to be here with you. But you deserve to know everything. Ryan snorted, clearly unimpressed. Good luck with that, Lucas. You'll need it. He turned and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him, leaving Braden and me alone in the aftermath of his revelations. I looked at Braden, my emotions a mix of confusion, anger, and something else. Hope, maybe. So where do we go from here? Braden took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping slightly as if the weight of his past had finally caught up with him. I don't know, but I want to figure it out. With you. I nodded, still unsure but willing to take that next step. Okay. But no more secrets, Braden. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. No more secrets, he agreed, reaching up to take my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. As I held his hand, I realized that this was just the beginning. The past wasn't something you could escape. It followed you, demanding to be confronted. But maybe, just maybe, we could face it together. The days following Ryan's unexpected visit were tense. Braden and I didn't talk much about what had happened, but it was always there, lurking in the background like an uninvited guest. We still spent time together, but there was a distance between us now, a barrier that hadn't been there before. I could feel Braden pulling back, and I wasn't sure how to close the gap. One evening after work, I decided I couldn't take the silence anymore. I texted Braden, asking if we could talk. His reply was immediate, telling me to come over. As I walked to his apartment, my mind was racing with all the things I wanted to say, but by the time I reached his door, I wasn't sure where to start. Braden opened the door, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He stepped aside to let me in, and I followed him into the living room, where he collapsed onto the couch with a heavy sigh. We need to talk, I began, my voice more forceful than I intended. He nodded, not looking at me. Yeah, we do. I sat down beside him, leaving some space between us. You've been distant, Braden. Ever since Ryan showed up, it's like you're pulling away from me. I need to know where we stand. He ran a hand through his hair, his expression conflicted. Lucas, it's not that I want to pull away. It's just, everything with Ryan brought up a lot of stuff I thought I'd buried. And now I'm scared I'm going to mess this up with you, just like I did with him. I reached out, placing my hand on his. You won't mess this up, Braden. Not if we're honest with each other, but we can't keep tiptoeing around these issues. We need to confront them together. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the fear and uncertainty in his eyes. You're right. I know you're right. It's just hard. I've never been good at facing things head. Then maybe it's time you start, I said, squeezing his hand. And I'll be here with you every step of the way. He took a deep breath, nodding slowly. Okay. No more running. No more avoiding. But you need to know that it's not just Ryan. There's more to my past. Things I haven't told you. I tensed, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. What kind of things? Braden stood up, pacing the room as if he was trying to gather his thoughts. After I left Ryan, I went through a pretty dark time. I made some bad decisions, got involved with the wrong people. It was a mess, Lucas, and I'm afraid that part of my life might catch up with me. With us. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. What kind of people are we talking about, Braden? He hesitated, then finally said, I got mixed up with some guys who were into some illegal stuff. Nothing violent, but risky. I thought I could handle it, but I was in way over my head. I'm not involved anymore, but I'm scared it could come back to haunt me. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. This was more than I had expected, more than I was prepared for. But as much as it scared me, it didn't change how I felt about him. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked, my voice softer now.
Because I didn't want to scare you away, he admitted, his voice breaking. I thought if I could just start fresh with you, maybe I could leave all of that behind. But I see now, that's not fair to you.
I stood up, moving to stand in front of him. Braden, I'm not going anywhere. But you have to be honest with me. We can't build something real if we're not open with each other, no matter how ugly the truth is.
He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Lucas. I didn't know how to handle it.
I pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly. We'll handle it together. But we need to know what we're up against. As I held him, I could feel the tension in his body slowly start to ease. He rested his head on my shoulder, and for the first time in days, I felt like we were on the same page again. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. There were still so many questions, so many unknowns, and I wasn't sure how we were going to navigate them. After a few minutes, Braden pulled back slightly, looking at me with a determined expression. I'll tell you everything, Lucas. No more secrets. But I need to know, are you sure you want to be a part of this? It's not going to be easy. I met his gaze, my resolve solidifying. I'm sure. Whatever comes our way, we'll face it together. He nodded, a small smile breaking through the tension. Okay. As we sat back down on the couch, Braden began to open up, telling me everything. About the people he'd been involved with, the mistakes he'd made, the fears he still carried. It was a lot to take in, and there were moments when I felt overwhelmed, but I listened to every word, knowing that this was the only way forward. By the time he finished, the sun had set, leaving the room bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights outside. We were both exhausted, but there was also a sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. Thank you for trusting me with this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for staying, he replied, his hand finding mine once more. As we sat there, holding hands in the quiet of his apartment, I realized that our relationship had reached a new level of intimacy. One built on trust, honesty, and the willingness to face our fears together. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that whatever happened next, we were in it together. The next few weeks were a strange mix of normalcy and tension. Braden and I tried to settle into a routine, but the weight of his past revelations hung over us like a dark cloud. We spent our evenings together, cooking dinner, watching movies, and talking late into the night. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but underneath I could feel the strain. One Friday evening, we decided to go out for a change. Dinner at a new restaurant that had just opened downtown. As we sat across from each other, sipping on wine and waiting for our food, I could see that Braden was distracted. His eyes kept darting around the room as if he was expecting something, or someone. Braden, is everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though my concern was growing. He looked at me, his expression tense, and forced a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking. About what? I pressed gently, not wanting to push too hard but needing to know what was on his mind. He hesitated, then sighed, leaning back in his chair. I've been feeling uneasy lately, like something's coming. I don't know what, but I can't shake the feeling. A chill ran down my spine. Do you think it has to do with what you told me about those people you were involved with? He nodded slowly. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't heard from anyone in a while, but that doesn't mean they're not out there watching, waiting. The idea of someone watching us, waiting to strike, made my stomach turn.
What should we do? I mean, should we be worried?
Braden reached across the table, taking my hand in his. I don't want you to worry, Lucas. I'll handle this. But I need you to know that if something does happen, if someone comes looking for me, you have to stay out of it. Promise
It alone. I'm not going anywhere, Braden. Whatever happens, we'll face it together.
He looked at me for a long moment, then finally nodded, his expression softening slightly. Okay, but we need to be careful. We can't take any chances. Our food arrived, and we tried to enjoy the meal, but the conversation had cast a shadow over the evening. As we ate, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept glancing around the room looking for anything. Or anyone out of place, but everything seemed normal. Still, the unease lingered. After dinner, we decided to walk back to Braden's apartment, hoping the fresh air would clear our minds. The streets were quiet, the city settling into the calm of the night. We walked in silence for a while, Braden's hand firmly in mine, as if he was afraid to let go. But as we turned the corner onto his street, I noticed a figure standing under a street lamp, partially obscured by the shadows. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively squeezed Braden's hand, pulling him closer. Braden, look, I whispered, nodding toward the figure. He tensed, his eyes narrowing as he followed my gaze. The figure didn't move, just stood there watching us. The street was eerily quiet. The only sound, the distant hum of traffic from the main road. Stay here, Braden said, his voice low and firm. What? No way, I hissed, grabbing his arm. I'm not letting you go over there alone. But he gently pried my fingers from his arm, giving me a look that told me he wasn't going to argue.
Lucas, please. I need to handle this.
Before I could protest further, he started walking toward the figure, his posture tense, every step deliberate. I stayed where I was, my heart pounding in my chest, watching as the distance between them closed. When Braden was only a few feet away, the figure stepped into the light, revealing a familiar face. Ryan, relief and confusion flooded me in equal measure. What the hell was he doing here? Ryan? Braden's voice was sharp, a mix of anger and surprise. Ryan held up his hands in a gesture of peace. I'm not here to cause trouble, Braden. I just needed to talk. About what? Braden demanded, his body still rigid with tension. About them, Ryan said, glancing around as if he was afraid of being overheard. They're looking for you, Braden. I heard some things. Things you need to know. My heart sank. This was exactly what I had been afraid of. I wanted to run over there, to stand by Braden, but I forced myself to stay put, knowing he needed to handle this on his own terms. What did you hear? Braden asked, his voice low. They know where you are. They've been asking about you getting closer. I don't know when they'll make their move, but it's only a matter of time, Ryan said, his tone urgent. Braden ran a hand through his hair, cursing under his breath. Ryan, why are you telling me this? Because, despite everything, I don't want to see you get hurt. And I don't want them going after him, Ryan said, jerking his head in my direction. Braden's eyes flicked to me, and I could see the conflict raging within him. He didn't want me involved, but it was too late for that now. Thanks for the warning, Braden finally said, his voice tight. But I can handle this. Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. Just be careful, Braden, and keep him safe. With that, Ryan turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Braden stood there for a moment, staring after him before finally coming back to me. "Lucas, we need to go," he said, his voice strained. I didn't argue. We walked quickly back to his apartment, the tension between us palpable. As soon as we were inside, Braden locked the door and leaned against it, closing his eyes as if trying to shut out the world. "Braden," I began, but he held up a hand, stopping me. "Lucas, I need you to listen to me," he said, opening his eyes to look at me. "Things are going to get complicated, maybe dangerous. I want you to stay with me, but I also need you to be careful. No more taking risks, okay?" I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of what we were facing. "Okay. But we're in this together. Whatever happens, we face it as a team." He managed a small, weary smile. "Yeah, together." As we settled in for the night, the reality of our situation sank in. We were no longer just two people trying to build a life together. We were two people standing on the edge of something dark and dangerous, and there was no telling what would happen next. But I knew one thing for sure: we would face it, whatever it was, together. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Braden pacing the apartment. The tension from the night before hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had grown thicker, more oppressive. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and watched him for a moment, trying to figure out how to approach the conversation that I knew was coming. "Braden," I finally called out, my voice still groggy. He stopped mid-pace and turned to face me. "Hey, did I wake you?" "Not exactly," I replied, swinging my legs out of bed. "What's going on?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, which was even messier than usual. "I've been thinking about everything. We need to take this seriously, Lucas. We can't just sit here and wait for something to happen." I nodded, fully awake now. "So what do we do? Do you think we should go to the police?" Braden shook his head, his expression grim. "The police can't help with this. These people, they operate outside the law, and if they find out we went to the cops, it could make things worse." The reality of our situation hit me hard. We were on our own, facing a threat I couldn't fully understand, but knew was real and dangerous. Then what's the plan? Braden sat down next to me on the bed, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. I've been thinking about that too. I have some contacts, people who might be able to help us stay under the radar, at least for a while. But it's risky." "Risky how?" I asked, my heart rate picking up. "Risky because getting in touch with them could tip off the wrong people," he explained. "But it might be our best shot at staying safe." I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "Okay, then we do it. Whatever it takes to stay safe." He looked at me, a mixture of gratitude and worry in his eyes. "Are you sure? This isn't just about me anymore, Lucas. You're in this too, and I don't want you to get hurt." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "We're in this together, remember?" He nodded, his expression softening. "Yeah." The rest of the day was spent making preparations. Braden made a few calls, speaking in hushed tones while I packed a bag with essentials, clothes, toiletries, anything we might need if we had to leave in a hurry. The atmosphere was tense, every sound outside the apartment making me jumpy, but I pushed through it, focusing on the task at hand. By late afternoon, Braden had arranged a meeting with one of his contacts, someone who could help us disappear for a while. We were supposed to meet them that evening at a nondescript bar on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the apartment, we prepared to leave. Braden grabbed his backpack, checking the contents one last time before slinging it over his shoulder. I followed suit, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. "Ready?" Braden asked, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, forcing a smile. We left the apartment, locking the door behind us, and made our way to the car. The drive to the bar was silent, the tension between us building with every passing mile. I kept glancing at Braden, trying to read his expression, but he was focused on the road, his jaw clenched tight. When we finally arrived, The bar looked exactly as Braden had described, run down, with a flickering neon sign that barely lit up the entrance. We parked a little way down the street, not wanting to draw attention, and walked the rest of the way. Inside, the bar was dimly lit, with a handful of patrons scattered around, nursing drinks and minding their own business. Braden led the way to a booth in the back where a man was already sitting, a glass of whiskey in front of him. He looked up as we approached, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Braden," the man greeted, his voice low and gravelly. "You're late." "Traffic," Braden replied smoothly, sliding into the booth across from him. I followed suit, sitting next to Braden, trying to look calm even though my heart was racing. The man's eyes flicked to me and he raised an eyebrow. "And this is Lucas," Braden said, a hint of protectiveness in his tone. "He's with me." The man studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right, so what's the situation?" Braden leaned in, keeping his voice low. "We need to disappear for a while. Things are getting complicated." The man took a sip of his whiskey, his expression unreadable. "Complicated how?" Braden hesitated, then said, "Let's just say there are some people who aren't happy with me, and they might be coming after us." The man's gaze sharpened. "This wouldn't have anything to do with that business a few years back, would it?" Braden nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, it would." The man let out a low whistle. "You're in deep then, but I can help you. I've got a place you can lay low off the grid, but it's not cheap." "We'll pay whatever it takes," Braden said quickly, glancing at me to make sure I was on board. I nodded, even though I had no idea how much money we were talking about. All I knew was that we needed to be safe, and this man was our best shot at that. The man smirked, clearly pleased with our desperation. "All right then, I'll set it up. Be ready to move tomorrow. I'll send you the details tonight." Braden nodded, relief evident in his posture. "Thank you." The man finished his whiskey in one gulp and stood up. "Don't thank me yet. Just stay out of sight and don't do anything stupid. These people don't mess around." With that, he walked away, leaving us sitting in the booth, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. We stayed there for a few minutes, neither of us speaking, until Braden finally broke the silence. "Lucas, I'm so sorry for dragging you into this," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "Don't," I said firmly, taking his hand in mine. "We're in this together. No regrets." He squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with gratitude and something else. Something deeper. "Thank you." We left the bar, the night air cool against our skin as we walked back to the car. The ride home was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts, but there was a sense of resolve between us now. We knew what we had to do, and we were ready to face it together. As we pulled up to the apartment, Braden parked the car and turned to me, his expression serious. "Tomorrow, everything changes. Are you ready for that?" I nodded, my heart steady now. "Yeah, I'm ready." We got out of the car and headed inside, knowing that this might be our last night in the apartment for a while. But whatever came next, we would face it together. The morning air was thick with anticipation, as Braden and I packed the last of our belongings into the car. We had slept little the night before, both of us too keyed up to find any real rest. The reality of our situation had fully set in. We were leaving everything behind, stepping into the unknown with only each other to rely on. As I zipped up my duffel bag, I caught Braden's eye. He looked tense but determined, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a steely focus. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his eyes. "Yeah," I replied, trying to match his resolve. "Let's do this." We loaded the bags into the trunk, checking and rechecking that we had everything we might need. Once we were sure, Braden locked the apartment door behind us, the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoing in the empty hallway. It felt final, like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The drive out of the city was quiet, the tension between us palpable. We didn't need to speak. The weight of what we were leaving behind and what lay ahead hung in the air. I stared out the window, watching as the familiar streets gave way to highways, the city skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror. After about an hour, Braden broke the silence. The place we're going to, it's remote, off the grid. We'll have to lay low for a while, but we should be safe there. I nodded, still staring at the landscape as it transformed from urban sprawl to rolling countryside.
How long do you think we'll need to stay there?
As long as it takes, he said, his voice grim. Until we're sure they're not coming after us anymore. We drove for hours, the tension slowly ebbing away as we put more distance between us and the city. But just as I started to relax, I noticed something in the side mirror. A dark SUV keeping pace with us, not too close, but not far enough away to be a coincidence. "Braden," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "we've got company." He glanced in the mirror, his expression darkening. "I see them. Hold on." Without warning, he hit the gas, the car surging forward as he swerved into the next lane. My heart raced as I gripped the seat, the adrenaline kicking in. The sous vide adrenaline kicking in. The SUV accelerated too, sticking close behind us, and it became clear that this wasn't just a random vehicle. They were following us, and they weren't planning on letting us go. "Shit," Braden muttered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They found us." "What do we do?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "We lose them," he said, his voice filled with calm determination that didn't match the fear I saw in his eyes. The road ahead was a mix of sharp turns and straight stretches, bordered by dense woods on either side. Braden pushed the car to its limits, taking turns at breakneck speed, the tires squealing as we tried to shake the SUV. But no matter how fast we went, they stayed right on our tail. "Lucas, grab my phone," Braden ordered, his voice tight. "There's a number in the recent calls. Dial it." I fumbled for his phone, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the recent calls. Finding the number he mentioned, I hit dial and put the phone on speaker. A gruff voice answered on the second ring.
"Braden, what's going on?"
"We've got a tail," Braden replied, his voice clipped. "SUV. Blacked. Out windows. They've been on us for the last 10 miles. We need an out. Now." "Shit," the voice on the other end swore. "Okay, listen. There's a turnoff about 2 miles ahead. A dirt road on your left. Take it. It's narrow and rough, but it leads to an old logging trail. They won't be able to follow you there." Braden nodded even though the guy couldn't see him. "Got it. We're almost there." The tension in the car was suffocating as we raced toward the turnoff. I kept glancing in the mirror, my heart pounding every time I saw the Savio closing in. It was clear they weren't giving up without a fight. "There!" Braden shouted, spotting the narrow dirt road the guy had mentioned. He yanked the wheel to the left, the car skidding as we veered off the highway and onto the rough trail. The tires kicked up a cloud of dust and gravel, the car bouncing over the uneven terrain. I looked back, hoping to see the SUV fall behind. But to my horror, it followed us onto the dirt road. "They're still coming," I shouted, panic lacing my voice. Braden gritted his teeth, focusing on the narrow trail ahead. "This road gets worse the further we go. They won't be able to keep up." The logging trail was barely more than a path, the trees closing in on either side as we barreled through. The car jolted violently over rocks and ruts, and I had to hold on to keep from being thrown around. But Braden was right. The further we went, the rougher the terrain became, and I saw the SUV struggling to maintain speed. "They're slowing down," I said, breathless. "Good," Braden muttered, eyes locked on the road. "We'll lose them in the woods." After what felt like an eternity, the trail took a sharp turn, and Braden seized the opportunity. He veered off the path, pulling the car into a thick grove of trees, the branches scraping against the sides as he cut the engine. We sat there, hidden among the dense foliage, our breaths coming in ragged gasps as we listened for the sound of the sous vide. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breathing and the distant rustling of leaves. Then we heard it. The rumble of the SUV's engine as it sped past our hiding spot, continuing down the trail. They didn't see us, I whispered, the relief washing over me in a wave. Braden let out a long breath, his body sagging with exhaustion. Yeah, we're good. We stayed there for a few more minutes, making sure the coast was clear before Braden cautiously restarted the car. He navigated us back onto the trail, driving slowly now, careful to stay hidden in the shadows of the trees. After a while, we reached a clearing where the trail ended, opening up to a secluded cabin tucked away in the woods. It was small and rustic, but it was off the grid, just like Braden had promised. "We'll be safe here," Braden said, pulling up in front of the cabin. "At least for now." I nodded, still trying to calm my racing heart. That was close. "Too close," he agreed, cutting the engine. But we made it. We got out of the car, the cool evening air a welcome relief after the tension of the chase. As we unloaded our bags and headed into the cabin, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and dread. We had escaped, but the danger was far from over. Inside, the cabin was simple but functional. A small kitchen, a living area with a fireplace, and a single bedroom. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As we settled in, Braden turned to me, his expression serious. "Lucas, I don't know how long we'll need to stay here, but we need to be ready for anything. We're not out of the woods yet, literally or figuratively." "I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "But we're here together. That's what matters." He smiled, a tired but genuine smile, and pulled me into a tight embrace. "Yeah." As we held each other in the quiet of the cabin, the adrenaline slowly ebbed away, leaving behind a sense of fragile peace. We had made it through the first real test, but I knew this was just the beginning. The shadow of Braden's past still loomed over us, and the road ahead was uncertain. But whatever came next, we would face it side by side. Days at the cabin passed in a blur of tension and unease. The isolation was both a blessing and a curse. While we were safe from immediate danger, the solitude left us with nothing but our thoughts, and the weight of uncertainty grew heavier with each passing hour. Braden and I fell into a routine of sorts, but it was a fragile one, held together by the unspoken fear that at any moment everything could fall apart. One evening, after yet another dinner eaten in near silence, Braden stood by the window, staring out at the darkening woods. The fire crackled softly in the background, casting flickering shadows across the room. I watched him, sensing the storm brewing inside him, the tension that had been building for days finally reaching a breaking point. "Braden," I said quietly, breaking the silence. "What's going on?" He didn't turn around, just kept staring out into the night. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" I pressed, even though I had a pretty good idea. "About us," he said, his voice tight. "About how we got here, about everything I've dragged you into." I stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We're in this together, remember? You didn't drag me into anything. I chose to be here." He finally turned to face me, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and frustration. "But you shouldn't have had to. Lucas, this isn't the life I wanted for us. Running, hiding. It's not fair to you." I could see how much this was tearing him apart, how the weight of everything was crushing him. "Braden, I don't care about fair. I care about fair. I care about you. We'll get through this, but we have to stick together." He shook his head, pulling away from me. "You don't understand. This isn't just about us anymore. These people, they're not going to stop. They'll keep coming until they find us, and I don't know if I can protect you." His words hung in the air, heavy with the truth we both had been avoiding. The danger wasn't going away, and the stress of it all was taking its toll on both of us. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not on him, not on him, not on us. "Braden, we've come this far. We can't turn back now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have to see this through, together." He looked at me, his expression torn. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Lucas. Every day I'm scared something will happen to you because of me. I'm scared that one day I won't be able to protect you, and I can't live with that. I could feel the fear in his words, the doubt that had been gnawing at him for days. But I also knew that giving up now would only make things worse. We don't have a choice, Braden. We're in too deep to back out now, but I believe in us. We're stronger together, and we can get through this. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me, as if searching for something. Reassurance, hope, maybe even an answer to a question he hadn't dared to ask. Then, without warning, he pulled me into a fierce embrace, holding on to me like I was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. "I'm so sorry, Lucas," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm sorry for everything." I hugged him back just as tightly, feeling the raw intensity of his fear and guilt. "We'll be okay," I whispered back. "We'll find a way." We stood there for a long time, just holding each other, the crackling fire the only sound in the room. But as much as I wanted to believe my own words, the reality of our situation was gnawing at me too. I could feel the walls closing in, the pressure building, and I knew we were nearing a breaking point. Later that night, long after Braden had fallen into a restless sleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a plan, something that could give us an edge. But every scenario I ran through ended the same way, with us still on the run, still in danger. Just as I was about to drift off, a noise outside jolted me awake. I sat up, my heart pounding, straining to hear. There it was again, a rustling sound like someone moving through the underbrush. I slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake Braden, and crept over to the window. The night was dark, the moon hidden behind thick clouds, but I could just make out the outline of a figure moving through the trees, heading toward the cabin. My blood ran cold as I realized what was happening. They had found us. I rushed over to Braden, shaking him awake. "Braden, wake up. They're here." He was on his feet in an instant, all traces of exhaustion gone. "Are you sure?" "I saw someone outside, moving toward the cabin," I said, my voice shaking. He didn't waste a second. "We need to go, now." We grabbed our bags, the ones we had packed for just this situation, and headed for the back door. But as we reached it, the sound of footsteps on the porch stopped us in our tracks. We were trapped. Braden turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Lucas, listen to me. Whatever happens, we stick together. Don't let them separate us." I nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "I won't." We heard the door creak open, the sound of boots on the wooden floor. Braden moved quickly, leading us toward a small trapdoor in the floor that I hadn't noticed before. He lifted it, revealing a narrow passage leading down into the darkness. "Go," he whispered urgently. "I'll be right behind you." I didn't hesitate. I climbed down into the passage, the darkness swallowing me whole. Braden followed, closing the trapdoor above us just as the intruders entered the room. We held our breath, the sound of our pounding hearts deafening in the confined space. Above us, we could hear the men moving through the cabin, their voices low and tense. They were searching for us, and it was only a matter of time before they found the trapdoor. Braden squeezed my hand, his grip reassuring despite the fear in his eyes. "Stay quiet," he mouthed, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, trying to calm my racing heart, trying to focus on the fact that we were still together, still had a chance. But deep down, I knew this was it, the tipping point. Everything we had been running from had finally caught up with us, and now there was no turning back. We waited in the darkness, every second feeling like an eternity, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. We crouched in the darkness of the narrow passage, the air thick with fear and anticipation. The muffled sounds of footsteps and low voices above us sent chills down my spine. Braden's hand was still in mine, his grip tight, grounding me in the moment. I could feel his breath on my neck, quick and shallow, mirroring my own. The intruders were close now, their heavy boots echoing through the cabin as they searched for us. I could hear them overturning furniture, rifling through drawers, getting frustrated. They knew we were here, somewhere. Braden leaned in close, his lips brushing my ear. When they find the trapdoor, we have to move fast. There's a tunnel that leads outside, but it's narrow. Stay right behind me no matter what." I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give us away. There was no room for error now, no second chances. This was it. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and then we heard it, a heavy thud, as someone kicked over the rug that had been covering the trapdoor. A moment of silence followed, then the distinct sound of wood creaking as they discovered the entrance. "They're here," one of the voices muttered, and I felt Braden tense beside me. The trapdoor was wrenched open, and a flashlight beam pierced the darkness sweeping over us. I held my breath, trying to shrink into the shadows, but there was no hiding now. "There!" Someone shouted, and the next thing I knew, Braden was pulling me forward into the tunnel. We scrambled through the narrow space, the walls closing in on either side. I could hear the men behind us, their footsteps pounding as they gave chase. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, the darkness disorienting, but Braden never hesitated. He knew where we were going, and I trusted him completely, focusing on the feel of his hand in mine, the sound of his breath just ahead of me. "Keep going," he urged, his voice strained but determined. The tunnel began to slope upward, and I could see a faint light ahead. Hope surged through me. An exit. We were almost there. But the men were gaining on us, their shouts growing louder, more frantic. I could hear them crashing through the tunnel, and panic threatened to overwhelm me. But then Braden's hand tightened around mine, pulling me forward, reminding me that we were in this together. We reached the end of the tunnel, where a rusty metal grate blocked the exit. Braden didn't slow down. He slammed his shoulder into it, forcing it open with a loud screech. The sudden burst of daylight was blinding after the darkness, but there was no time to hesitate. We crawled out into the open air, into a dense thicket of trees. The forest surrounded us, offering some cover. But the men were right behind us. Braden pulled me to my feet, and we took off, running as fast as we could through the underbrush, dodging low-hanging branches and leaping over fallen logs. Behind us, the men emerged from the tunnel, shouting and cursing as they gave chase. I could hear their footsteps crashing through the undergrowth, getting closer with every second. My lungs burned, my legs screamed for relief, but I couldn't stop. Not now. "There's a clearing up ahead," Braden panted, glancing back at me. "We can lose them in the open, but we have to keep moving." I nodded, too breathless to speak, and pushed myself to keep up with him. The trees began to thin out, the underbrush giving way to a grassy clearing. I could see the sunlight filtering through the branches, casting long shadows across the ground. But as we burst into the clearing, I realized with a sinking feeling that we were exposed. The men were close behind, and there was nowhere to hide. Braden must have seen it too, because he slowed down, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of cover. "Keep going," he urged, his voice tight with urgency. But before we could make it across the clearing, a shot rang out, splitting the air with a deafening crack. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat as I realized they were armed. "Get down!" Braden shouted, shoving me to the ground just as another shot whizzed past, narrowly missing us. We scrambled for cover behind a fallen tree, our breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the men closing in, their voices cold and determined. There was no way we could outrun them now. Braden turned to me, his expression grim but resolute. "Lucas, listen to me. This is it. We have to make a stand." I looked at him, fear and determination warring within me. But how? They have guns. He glanced around, then handed me a thick branch that had broken off the tree we were hiding behind. "We fight with what we have. We can't let them take us." I took the branch, my hand shaking, but I knew he was right. We had no choice. We had to fight. The men were closing in, their footsteps crunching on the gravel. Braden and I exchanged a look that said everything we hadn't had time to say. Then, without another word, we stood up ready to face them. The first man appeared at the edge of the clearing, his gun raised. Braden didn't hesitate. He charged at him, swinging the branch with all his strength. The man went down with a grunt, his gun clattering to the ground. But there were more of them. I saw another man emerging from the trees, his eyes locked on Braden. I didn't think. I just acted. I threw myself at him, the branch connecting with his arm, knocking his gun away. He turned on me, fury in his eyes, and for a moment I thought it was over. But Braden was there, tackling him to the ground. The two of them struggled, rolling across the dirt, fists flying. I stood frozen, watching in horror as the fight played out in front of me. The other men were closing in, their guns trained on us. "Lucas, run!" Braden shouted, his voice desperate.
Get out of here!
But I couldn't leave him. Not like this. I grabbed the fallen gun, my hands shaking, and aimed it at the nearest man. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking. "Don't move!" The men hesitated, their eyes flicking between me and Braden, who was still grappling with the man on the ground. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, Braden managed to knock his opponent unconscious. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing the gun from the man's holster and aiming it at the others. "Back off," he snarled, his voice filled with fierce protectiveness that made my heart swell. The remaining men glanced at each other, clearly weighing their options. But something in Braden's eyes must have convinced them that he wasn't bluffing, because they slowly began to retreat, backing away into the trees. "Get out of here!" Braden shouted after them. "And don't come back!" The men didn't need to be told twice. They turned and fled, disappearing into the forest. For a long moment, Braden and I just stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. When we were sure they were gone, Braden finally lowered his gun, turning to look at me. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft now, concerned. I nodded, my legs feeling like jelly as I collapsed onto the ground. "Yeah, I'm okay." He knelt beside me, his hand gently cupping my face, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized was there. "We did it, Lucas. We made it." I looked into his eyes, seeing the love and relief there, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to believe that we might actually be okay. "Yeah," I whispered, leaning into his touch. "We did." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the clearing, Braden pulled me into his arms, holding me close. We were battered, bruised, and exhausted, but we were together, and that was all that mattered. In that moment, I knew that no matter what happened next, we would face it together. We had survived the worst, and now we had a chance to start over, free from the shadows of the past, ready to build a future we could both believe in.